101st COVID press conference. So I know there are many of you who have not missed one of these, and I want to thank you for tuning in. So this is our 101st COVID press conference, and I hope you have found them useful, and I hope you continue to tune in as we go forward. Now, I know everybody's used to watching this on a Wednesday. Today, obviously, we're here on a Monday, so I want to thank you for tuning in today on a Monday. I also want to give you a heads up about something different we're going to be doing next week. So next week, I'm going to have a press conference every single day at 1 o'clock. Next Monday, it'll be the full-length press conference at 1 o'clock, similar to the one that we're about to have now, where I'll touch on a variety of different topics related to the coronavirus. But every other day next week at 1 o'clock, we're going to be having a short 15-minute live press conference just to talk about K through 12 public school reopening. This is a Herculean effort to get our kids back to school safely, and we're many questions. So we decided next week, every single day, 1 o'clock press conference, and Tuesday through Friday, it'll just relate to public schools. I do want to say thank you to members of the media and to the press outlets who are agreeing to take the press conference live and cover it every single day. I appreciate that. It's you're doing your part in the crisis, and I appreciate your willingness to let us go ahead and do that. Okay, so I have a lot of news today. Bear with me. This is a number of things we have to go over. We begin, as we always do, with a look at the data, and I'd ask you to please put the data on the screen. It's a good news story with today's data, and I want to thank the people of Rhode Island for sticking with it, staying at it, wearing your masks, and following the rules. Yesterday, we had 39 new cases, but even more important than the number of cases, we had a percent positive of 1.1%. That's excellent. That's just where, 1.1% is, that should make you feel confident that we're doing things well here in Rhode Island. 39 cases is a low number. However, even more important, we're testing more and more people. And you're going to start to see the number of folks that we test really ramp up in the coming months as school starts. So we want to keep our eye on that percent positive, which is 1.1%. Yesterday, I have no new deaths to report from yesterday, thank God. But unfortunately, we lost 5 Rhode Islanders over the weekend. So just take a moment to keep those folks in your thoughts. That every day, almost, we continue to lose Rhode Islanders to this horrible disease. And our hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to those who lost a loved one over the weekend. As you can see from the rest of the data on your screen, the case numbers and very importantly, the hospitalizations have remained steady. And also the percent positive, very low at 1.1%. I want you to know it's been below 3% every day since we started phase 3. So by and large, it's, as I say, it's a pretty good news story. I'm asked frequently, Governor, should we be reopening slower, faster? And the truth of it is, it's a judgment call, and it's a balance. It is a balance between keeping everyone safe and keeping a lid on the virus, but also letting folks get back to work. Right now, at this point, we still have over 100,000 people on unemployment insurance. And recently, I've been asked, are we getting the balance right? Should, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, they have held back on their economic reopening a little more than we have. I have made the decisions I've made to strike that balance. And a new analysis today, actually, by CNN and Moody's ranks Rhode Island's economy as the 6th best in the country on what they call the back to normal index, getting back to our normal economy. So from April to July, we saw a 7% decrease in our unemployment rate, putting us at the 10th best in America. So I would say this, there's no perfect. Everything is, I'm doing the best with my decisions. But today, as I come before you for our 101st press conference, we are reporting, among the best states in America, top 10, for getting our economy back to where it was, and also a percent positive rate of 1.1%. So as we evaluate how we're doing with coronavirus, it's a terrible thing. We have 100,000 people out of work, restaurants and shops hanging on by a thread, and my heart goes out to all of you, and we're working to get you back to work. But relative to a lot of other states, I think we're holding our own pretty well, and I want to thank everybody for doing that. The best thing we can do to get people back to work and reopen our economy even more is to do what we've been doing. Wear your mask, wash your hands, don't go out of your house ever if you're sick, social distance as much as you can, social gatherings, 15. By the way, I know that's hard. I had to host a family gathering over the weekend. Normally we would have 20 more people in our house, 14 people. So we're in it together, and I'm asking you, please keep following the rules, because we want to keep people out of the hospital and we want to get folks back to work and kids back to school. So this is where we are 6 months into living this together. Okay, I want to start briefly with an update on what we saw at Rhode Island's businesses over the past week. I usually like to do that on the Monday. As an update for you, last week we conducted more than 1,100 inspections. If you see someone who works for the Department of Business Regulations, say thank you, or the Department of Health. These guys are working so hard. We have a small staff, over 1,000 inspections. It's another record high, another record of how many places we've inspected. Good news. Employee and customer mask compliance remained around 95%. Good job. And capacity restrictions at all the retail and restaurants we visited remained at 98%. That's great news. We are going to be able to continue to keep our shops and restaurants open if you guys continue to follow the rules at 95 and 98%. We saw 13% of restaurants and bars without proper separation between bartenders and customers. That continues to be a problem. And 6% with crowding at the bar area. Now, I will say that is improvement. That's the best data we've ever had. 6% and 13% is the lowest non-compliance we've had. So thank you to bar owners and restaurant owners. It's still not where we want to be. You have to try a little harder to cut down on the crowds and keep distance between the bartender, or more than distance, a plexiglass between the bartender and the servers. We also saw 98% compliance with bars closing at 11 o'clock. So I want to thank you for that. I know that's tough, but it's working. It's reflected in our numbers. These steps are working. So I want to thank you all for your continued cooperation. I want to spend a few minutes now talking about school. Will we reopen schools? The top of everybody's mind right now. And look, this is important. We have an entire generation of young people who are depending on us to get this right, to help them get the education they deserve. And so we are very focused on it. I have a few announcements related to where we are. I want to begin by complimenting the National Guard for the role that they have played in the coronavirus pandemic, being front and center in our response from day one. We were the first state in America to deploy our Guard to do drive-through testing centers. We've deployed the Guard to go into nursing homes and congregate care settings to provide support. They've helped us with contact tracing. Under General Callahan's fantastic and exemplary leadership, the Rhode Island National Guard has risen to the challenge over and over again. And I want to thank the General for his leadership and commitment. I don't think he's had a day off from the beginning. And I want to thank every member of the Guard who's helped us. Of course, the reward for fantastic work is more work. So we are, again, going to be relying on them to help us open schools safely. And make sure that our facilities are ready when it's time to open school. So to that end, I am announcing now that we are launching, effective today, a Education Operations Center. This Education Operations Center is going to operate very much like the EOC that we stand up during a hurricane or a blizzard or some other kind of natural disaster. It's going to be staffed by folks across state agencies, including the National Guard. It'll have National Guard, RIDE, which is the Department of Education, the Department of Health, the Department of Transportation, RIPTA, and the EMA. So this will be 24/7 operation, entirely focused on providing real-time support to our schools, drawing upon the operational, logistics, and transportation expertise of the Rhode Island National Guard. So this, we've been spending a lot of time with parents, teachers, teachers union leaders, principals, superintendents. Everybody wants to do the right thing. Everybody wants to get the kids back in school. The question is, how do we do it? And the answer is, it's just a lot of hard work, a lot of logistical planning, transportation planning, laying out the classroom differently. And so today I want you to know we're there for you. You're not on your own in the school districts. And that's why, as of effective today, we're standing up an Emergency Operations Center. We're calling it the EDOC, just related to K through 12 education. I want to spend a minute now talking about what our school districts are responsible for versus what the state will provide. I think this is important for folks to know, it's important for parents to realize, and frankly, it's important for the school districts to know. So I'd ask you please to put up the slide that we've prepared that explains the role of the state and the role of the local districts. The slide before you is intended to illustrate the unified and, I think, innovative approach that we're taking here in Rhode Island, both to getting schools open safely and providing support to the school districts once they've opened. On the left-hand side of the slide in front of you, you see the responsibilities of your school district. First and foremost, the job of every school leader, every principal, every superintendent, is to provide high-quality learning experiences for their kids, for their students. So in order to ensure that they can do so safely, they're also responsible for immediately isolating symptomatic students, immediately reporting probable cases through the new Department of Health school reporting portal, assisting the Department of Health with contact tracing and case investigation, implementing all required health and cleaning protocols, providing safe transportation based on our state guidance and with the support of the National Guard, maintaining supplies of personal protective equipment and sanitation equipment. And the local school districts are also responsible for establishing clear and frequent processes for communicating with the Department of Education, the Department of Health, and their entire school community. It's a heavy lift. Superintendents have a lot to do. We're calling on you to step up as leaders, same with principals, and by and large, you're doing a terrific job and working hard, and I want to thank you for your leadership. On the right-hand side of that slide is the list of supports that it's offered by the state and state agencies through our EDOC. The Department of Health is going to be providing ongoing public health guidance to schools, in addition to overseeing case investigation, contact tracing, and testing operations for all staff and students. They'll also be leading ongoing on-site facility assessments for school buildings, and I'm going to talk about that more in a second. So I want to pause and make this clear, because this is different in Rhode Island than I think in pretty much every other state in the country. We, the state, are going to undertake the responsibility of providing testing, contact tracing, case investigation for all the schools and all the school districts. We're a small state. We don't really have a county form of government, and we felt that was the right thing to do. If you're a parent or a teacher and you're listening to this, I hope it gives you some sense of confidence that the state, we've learned how to do testing. We've learned how to do contact tracing and case investigation. So we're going to handle this for your school in communication with the school, and I hope you have some confidence knowing that that's the way it will be handled. The Department of Education will be providing operating guidance and instructional support with a focus on learning outcomes, ensuring that every school has the best possible in-person and distance learning platforms, and they'll be communicating constantly with school leaders. And I want to thank the commissioner and applaud her and her team at RIDE for doing a fantastic job helping to get the facilities ready, but also doing what they do best, which is helping us to deliver high-quality education to our students. And then our other state partners will be providing on-the-ground assistance teams, contingency supplies, and planning and logistics support. So what is that going to look like? The Operations Center will be ready and able to assist with anything that the school needs on an ongoing basis. What's that mean? If a school's running low on hand sanitizer or masks, that team will immediately arrange for the supplies that are needed. If a school's struggling with logistics and needs logistical support to ensure strong in-person learning, the team will be there to provide that assistance. When you have a student or a staff member who tests positive, which is going to happen, that will happen, and we're prepared for it, this team from the Operations Center will be on the ground at the school as quickly as possible to test, isolate, quarantine, and do everything we know how to do to prevent a large outbreak so that we limit the interruption to in-person learning. This Education Operations Center is activated as of today, and by next week, every school district will have a designated single point of contact at the Operations Center and will ensure a frequent line of communication between the districts and the Operations Center, as is illustrated on the slide. The Education Operations Center will ramp up over the next few weeks with the recognition of several milestones, including the return of teachers on September 9th and the return of students on September 14th. Once the schools are open after the 14th, the leaders at the Education Operations Center will be prepared to deploy assistance teams to any school in any city or town on a moment's notice. We've learned over the past 6 months how to do this. When there was an outbreak at a nursing home, an outbreak in the prison system, we've learned how to deploy teams quickly and support teams. And so we're going to take all of the learnings and the innovation and do the same exact thing, what we've done there, for schools. So the message with this Operations Center is, if you're a principal or superintendent, yes, it's true, you're the front line, you have the primary responsibility, but we are right there with you. And a phone call away to provide the backup you need so that you'll be able to be successful. I want to talk for a second about the Department of Health's role in all of this, a question I get frequently. In mid-June, a couple of months ago, the Department of Education and the Department of Health released guidance to every school district on developing plans that meet all the health requirements for in-person learning. It was a detailed 34-page document, and it outlined, if you haven't checked it out, I would recommend that you do it, now that we're thinking schools closer, so it's more top of mind. It's a 34-page document. It outlines everything from class size limits, screenings, schedules, visitor policies, transportation, school activities, etc. It's currently available, as it has been, at backtoschoolri.com. Every single school district, as of now, has prepared an integrated COVID-resilient reopening plan based on these guidelines that addresses the health and safety of all students, including social, emotional, and mental health. Every plan was submitted to RIDE, and every plan has been thoroughly reviewed by RIDE and RIDO with a focus on the district's ability to deliver effective education outcomes in compliance with the Department of Health standards. But putting safety plans in place is just one step. You can put something on paper. We have to make sure it's actually implemented on the ground. And this is hard stuff. It's easier to write it. It's hard to write on paper, but it's easier to write on paper than it is to actually operationalize it every day, day after day. So with this in mind, I have established a facilities readiness team with the sole purpose of walking through every single public school to assess their compliance with the Department of Health's facilities guidelines, all prior to any student entering those facilities for the first time. As far as I know, we're the only state in the country doing this and making this commitment to our teachers and to our students for their safety. This isn't my idea. I've heard this. I have spent many hours in the past couple of weeks listening to teachers, parents, union leaders, principals, superintendents, charter school leaders, and I hear the same thing. Of asking, please, could we have someone from RIDO, from the Guard, from the team, go through the facility to make sure that the facility is ready to accept students and that the facility looks like what the plan says it should look like. So today I'm pledging you that that will happen. Before any students and teachers steps foot to begin school on the 14th, every facility will have had a walkthrough to make sure that it is ready to accept students. Department of Health has developed a detailed 13-page guidance document that covers every element of a safe school. Classroom layout, hallway layout, cleaning, ventilation, air circulation, availability of isolation space, and on. That document, that 13-page document, is going to be posted today, by the end of the day, at backtoschoolri.com. So you can feel free to look at that. If you're a parent or a teacher, I'd recommend you look at it. No one should have to go to school or go to work in a school and feel unsafe. So we're doing everything we know how to do to make you safe and make you feel safe, which is what you deserve. So check out this 13-page document, and that's the document that the inspectors will use to make sure that the school is ready. Additionally, over the weekend, we've also engaged a nationally recognized air quality expert who will be participating in the walkthroughs to ensure that schools have taken appropriate precautions to circulate the air. Finally, and additionally, this isn't going to stop once the doors open. That team, I'm going to keep it in place throughout the school year, and they're going to do continuous and unannounced on-site inspections and audits, similar to what we do with restaurants, to make sure that throughout the year, the schools are doing what they're supposed to do in order to keep students and teachers safe. And by the way, we're doing it together. This isn't about, we're going to have the audits, we're going to have the inspectors go in, but it's not a gotcha, because we're also going to have our operations center and support teams available. So if you're not in compliance, we're going to help you get into compliance. This is an enormous amount of work, and I have to thank my team. It's been a very long weekend, and I feel great. I mean, a long 6 months, but we've finalized it all over the weekend, and we're ready. You know, our pledge to you, there's going to be bumps in the road. We're going to have, kids are going to get sick. There are going to be outbreaks. The first month of school, everyone has to be patient and innovative and thoughtful. But as I've surveyed what other cities and states are doing, I believe this to be, if not the most comprehensive, among the most comprehensive. It's all designed to do right by our teachers and to do right by our students, so that you can be in a school which is where kids learn best, and be safe. And by the way, we're going to learn a lot. You know, we're going to be good on September 14th. We're going to be a whole lot better on October 14th and November 14th. But my commitment to you, this is a lot of resources, and the state is doing this work to make sure that you're safe and you feel safe when you step in, that your buildings have been inspected. A quick note about private schools, parochial schools, religious schools. Next Monday, a week from today, we'll be making our school reopening decision, and I'll be announcing that based on where we are at that time with regard to the data and our ability to provide testing and other operational supports. So that's next Monday. Tune in for that announcement. I'll go through the 5 metrics and make a final announcement about school. In the meantime, I've been asked about guidance for non-public schools, Catholic schools, private schools, other religious schools. I want to make 2 announcements now about the private schools. First of all, the state intends to provide all schools, including non-public schools, with the same testing, contact tracing, and case investigation supports. So all schools, public and private, are going to receive from the state the same level of testing, contact tracing, and case investigation. It's in everybody's public, it's in the state's public health interest for this to happen. The precise details of what that system will look like will be online this Wednesday. So end of day Wednesday, we'll put online exactly how the state is going to be operationalizing testing, contact tracing, and case investigation, and what that says applies to all schools, public and private. That'll be at backtoschoolri.com. Second thing I want to announce is private schools and parochial schools, religious schools, non-public schools, who are ready are allowed to open prior to September 14th. It's a question we've been getting frequently. So all of these schools have been developing their own safety plans and have been in close contact with the Department of Health and the Department of Education. Many of them are very anxious to bring students back before the 14th. So as long as your plans have been reviewed and you're ready to get back before the 14th, you are allowed to do that. You don't have to wait for the state's September 14th deadline. You do, however, have to wait until next Monday on the 31st, which is when I'll be announcing if you can go back in person. And hopefully that clears up some confusion. We've been in contact with private schools across the state. You've done a terrific job developing plans to bring your students back. As I understand it, most of you plan to bring all of your students back in person, which we think is terrific, and you are allowed to do that prior to September 14th if you're ready. Okay, I want to talk for a second about what does it mean to be safe? You know, you hear a lot, you hear it all the time, every day. I want to send the kids back to school if it's safe. And I think that is a term, of course, absolutely. And as I've just spent a few minutes outlining, we're going to make the buildings ready. We'll have the air quality ready. We're going to have testing, contact tracing to make sure the kids are safe and the teachers are safe. But last week, there are many things that go into safe. What is safe for a student? And certainly safe is reducing the risk of anybody contracting coronavirus. Can never be risk-free, but reducing that risk, doing everything we know how to do. But there's something else that goes into safe, which is making sure our children are physically, emotionally, intellectually, mentally safe. And I have to say, the stories of the way our children have struggled in the past 6 months with distance learning are truly heartbreaking. And as your governor, I am of the view that it's not always safe for kids to stay home. Because we've heard from children and parents and health professionals that kids are suffering and it isn't safe. Last Thursday, I was joined on my weekly Facebook Live forum by 2 mental health professionals from Bradley Hospital. And I was quite struck by what they said. They said, quote, parents are seeing new symptoms in their kids, new symptoms of severe depression, isolation, and deep sadness. And, quote, these are things their kids have never before displayed. They also noted a significant increase in calls to their Kids Link hotline about anxiety and self-harm, including suicide. And they expressed concern about continuing to see a spike in those calls with the continuation of distance learning. By the way, I want to thank Dr. Jenks and her colleague Barbara Austin for joining me, and I want to thank the folks at Bradley for being just phenomenal throughout this crisis. I know you're overwhelmed. You're doing a terrific job. Kids Link is saving lives, and I want to thank you. These struggles are also reflected in the data, as well as communication that the commissioner receives. So NWEA, which is a national education nonprofit, estimates that students participating in fully remote learning can retain about 70% of their reading comprehension as compared to in-person learning, and about 50% of their math. On top of the data, we hear it. We hear the stories, and the commissioner hears the stories. We hear from families that distance learning, quote unquote, just didn't work for my family. And by the way, it's everywhere. It's not just, people say, oh, that's just what's happening in the inner city. That's not true. A family in East Greenwich said, my son, who's always been a star student, essentially, quote unquote, checked out during distance learning and fell behind. A family in Lincoln said distance learning was, quote, just not working. And by the way, I want to say this. Lincoln, East Greenwich, Providence, everywhere, all the teachers and administrators gave it their all. This is by no means criticism of what they did. They tried hard, Herculean efforts to turn on a dime and deliver distance learning. But the truth of it is absolutely not a substitute for in-person learning. And we're seeing it. So I ask you, is it safe? Is it safe to leave a kid at home, knowing depression, anxiety, isolation, suicidal thoughts is on the rise, knowing 911 calls for domestic violence are through the roof still, knowing many kids will be left home alone, trying to teach themselves on a computer? We owe it to this generation of children to do everything in our power to get them back in school. It will not be easy. It will not be perfect. We will make mistakes. But I am personally committed to do everything I know how to do and work as hard as I know how to work to get children in school and keep them and their teachers safe. No one deserves to feel afraid when they walk into work, and the same goes for teachers. But I'm calling on everybody, please pitch in every way you know how to help us get these children back in school. And by the way, if you're a parent and you're just not ready, fine, that's fine. That's your decision. We want you to have choice. If you have an underlying health condition, if your child does, if your child is challenged mentally, physically, fine. We value that. We respect your decision. Keep them home. And the learning, distance learning in the fall will be better than the spring because we've learned more. But if you want to send your children back to school, then I would encourage you to go ahead and do that. Another very concerning impact of distance learning, which leads me to the next point I want to make, was a dramatic decline in childhood immunizations. This is a problem. This is a problem that we have to continue to work on. This is going to be a real problem in the fall, in the winter, if we don't fix it. I've addressed it many times from this podium. The closure of doctors' offices, the imposition of the stay-at-home order, and the fact that kids weren't in school, seeing the school nurse, has led to a dramatic drop in childhood immunizations. I've talked about it over and over again. Childhood immunizations are not where they need to be. It's related to a lot of things, but also we used to run immunization clinics in schools. The kid would see a nurse, see a teacher, so it's all contributing. The pediatricians of Rhode Island have stepped up hugely, and I made some money available from our COVID relief fund. With the pediatricians, a couple months ago, we launched an aggressive campaign to turn that trend around. And by June, this is good news, we were only 8% below the previous year. So that's terrific. That's a dramatic improvement from when I was here in April and May. However, the reality is that only 75% of kids entering kindergarten this year will have all of their necessary immunizations. And it's about 50% for kids entering 7th grade. If you're a parent out there and you're hearing me, and your children haven't been immunized, please pick up the phone right now and call your pediatrician or call a community health center. You need to get your kids immunized. And pediatricians are doing extra clinics, walk-through clinics, nights, weekends, extra hours. They're doing everything they can, but please pick up the phone right now if a child in your life has not been immunized. We're facing a virus for which we don't yet have a vaccine, so there's truly no reason that we shouldn't have every child immunized by the time they go back to school. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you to the pediatricians. Thank you to the community health clinics. Please get your kids immunized before they go back to school. Switching gears, 2 other quick announcements. I want to briefly address our cities and towns. I want to thank mayors and town managers for hanging in there through this crisis. You're doing a terrific job, and particularly recently, mayors have all put in extra effort to help us cut down on congregating and enforcing social gathering limits. I want to thank you for doing that. Every city and town, like the state, like most companies, is having a tough time with their budget. And next year will be a difficult budget year, no doubt about it. So on the one hand, and we want to do what we can to support cities and towns. Now, our cities and towns, in most other states, really nearly every other state, cities and towns have been responsible for testing, contact tracing. Many counties have their own departments of health. Bigger cities have a Department of Health. They'll run a hospital or a county hospital. Thankfully, our cities and towns haven't had to shoulder any of that burden. The state has handled all of that for them, contact tracing, and therefore the state's bearing the cost of contact tracing, quarantining, testing, housing vulnerable populations, obviously all the hospitals. But all of that being said, even though they haven't had to bear those costs, it's hard for them. Cities and towns have seen their revenues really decline, which hurts the bottom line. My philosophy all along has been to use this crisis as an opportunity to innovate, to change the way we do business so that we can meet the needs of our population, even though we have to tighten our belt because our budgets are strained. And I've been having a great dialogue with a lot of town leaders around this, and we want to support them and help them. It's going to be hard to balance budgets. Money won't be there, so they have to get innovative. So in that spirit, today I'm announcing that at the request of the League of Cities and Towns, I'll be convening a municipal resilience task force. It's an 8-member task force. It'll include 4 municipal leaders selected by the League of Cities and Towns, 2 private sector leaders, and 2 budget and revenue officials representing the state. And together, that group will be tasked with developing recommendations for cities and towns on innovative strategies and tactics to prepare for a post-COVID future, or a during COVID and post-COVID future, where government can be responsive and effective and resilient, and also do so while saving money. The reality is we have to serve our citizens, budget is strained, so we're going to work together to be innovative to do both. It's going to include shared services, ideas around shared services, intergovernmental partnerships, and new technology. So I'm excited to support them, and I'm actually looking forward to seeing what we come up with. Go to any restaurant, it's amazing what they're doing. They are changing their business model to meet the needs of the challenge. They're getting creative. Every business is getting creative, and we are too in the state, and cities and towns are going to do the same, and we're going to help you do that. Last announcement relates to unemployment insurance. It's a brutal reality right now. If you have a job, you're lucky. I'm lucky. We are lucky if we have our jobs and we're getting paid. There are so many Rhode Islanders, over 100,000, who are still on unemployment insurance. So last week, I was asked about the FEMA Unemployment Assistance Program, and I want to provide an update on that. We've been in touch over the past handful of days with FEMA, and I have an announcement to make today. I'm pleased to share that we asked for and have received approval for funding from FEMA, from the federal government, which will guarantee an extra $300 for 3 weeks, so a total of $900, to Rhode Islanders receiving unemployment insurance benefits. So I want to be clear about this. This is temporary, and I'm calling on the Trump administration to do the right thing and make it permanent, or do something even more for the millions of Americans who are out of work. Having said that, it's good news. So we received word that we've been approved. The Department of Labor and Training is setting up a system to actually disperse the monies. We hope that that'll be ready in the next couple of weeks so that they'll be distributing the money. And I promise you we're going to do it as fast as possible. If it's ready in a week, it'll be a week. It's more likely 2 to 3 weeks because we have to set up a whole new system. But the bottom line is, this is good news. This is good news. So if you're out there and if you had been receiving the extra $600, which went away on August 1st, you are now going to get a one-time additional payment of $900. So it's not enough, but it's something. You ought to have it within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Department of Labor and Training is setting that up, and I hope the $900 can help you alleviate some of your concerns and pay some of your bills. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Infante Green and then come back for questions.
Good afternoon. I want to start off with how much I appreciate the work that General Callahan and his team at the Rhode Island National Guard Bureau. As the governor outlined, we have formed a very close working relationship with the Guard, and their operational and logistic expertise will pay off for students and families when we head back to school in a few weeks. So we're extremely grateful. Adding the National Guard to the team and support that we have had from Dr. Alexander Scott and RIDO staff is making Rhode Island Come Back to School team the best in the country, and I'm proud to be part of it. The Educational Operational Center that will be hosted at RIDE offices is an unprecedented step. You have not heard that in any other education system. It has 2 powerful benefits. First, it will give us a dedicated, responsive group of professionals who can focus on individual schools and districts when they need support when we get back to school. Second, this will allow the rest of our staff to continue to focus on our core responsibility and mission, ensuring that our students are learning, that our professional development is first rate, and that we're pushing our kids to make the real academic progress this year. We keep talking about kids going back to school, but it's what happens when they go back to school. When COVID hit us last spring, we made the most that we could of a challenging situation. As the governor mentioned, for certain groups of students, distance learning was a real challenge. We need to focus on getting those kids back into the classroom as soon as it is safe to do so. Today, I want to talk a little bit more about these vulnerable groups of students. If you recall, we were national leaders in putting it up, really operationalizing distance learning. However, that does not mean that it worked for everyone. That's not what that meant. Other states just threw in the towel. We did not. We put it in place in a week. But that does not, I want to repeat that, that does not mean that it worked for everyone, and we still have not measured what it looks like. So we need to focus on getting those kids back. First, for many students that didn't have computers or Wi-Fi to get ready, we worked really hard to get there. We went from districts being at 50 to 95%. However, we noted, not just in Rhode Island, but in America, that there's a digital divide. We got the Wi-Fi, we got the computers, now we have to update the computers. So we bridged some of that gap, but we haven't closed it completely, or we haven't bridged it completely. There are families that can go out and buy the technology, but not everyone can do that. Second, not everyone can work from home, and this poses risks for children and students. Many families in our state are faced with the choice between putting food on the table and helping kids stay engaged in distance learning. There's no right answer for this. There are only wrong answers. Stay home and quit working or support your child. This is a very difficult situation. This is where we are right now. We're grappling with the reality of different families. So I want us to think about that. And a lot of people say, well, school is not a babysitting entity. No, it's not. It's an educational entity. And that means who supports the kids. Next, many multilingual learners struggle to make progress via online platform. You have to learn a new language, new procedures, and do it all online. Another obstacle in the learning. Population that was at single digits to begin with. Finally, our differently able students need personal attention to stay engaged. Many of those students require hands-on, concrete instruction to help them with their specific needs. Teachers did their best, but we heard time and time again from parents of students that are differently abled. This is not working for my child. My child is not making the progress. And for parents that have students that have special needs, every second counts. Public health and safety drive all of our decisions. We know that. But we need to do everything we can to return to the classroom. If the public health situation allows, the approach that we're talking about and detailed metrics to our supports of our districts in the operations center, so much more, we need to build on what it looks like to be in the classroom safely. The governor talked about it. What does it look like to be safe? It's not just health, but mental health. So I want us to be very clear when we talk about the plans, we're also talking about the instructional plans. What does it look like? And your child doesn't have to have a special need for you to want your child to be into the school building. I'd like to take a quick mention of two districts that are doing a phenomenal job as they are planning to reopen. South Kingstown is focusing on what they're calling power standards to really focus in on key content areas. We should be looking at the standards. And Newport has a great emphasis on using data early on to help focus on the key areas of student growth. I will note that both districts have an emphasis on social-emotional learning. You heard it from the governor, which is critical with the anxiety and the change that our students have experienced. So we know that there's a lot of work to be done. We know that we've had challenges. We know that we've learned a lot through distance learning. But we also saw our attendance be the highest and then drop off. We saw it. So we really have to do everything that we can to make sure that we're in the right place educationally. So now I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Alexander Scott, who will give us more data.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Governor, as well. Good afternoon, everyone. As the Governor said, thank you for your flexibility and joining us on a Monday this week. We have a lot of moving parts and a huge team that's been working very hard. As I usually do, I'll start with an overview of the data. We have 39 new cases to report. Generally, our percent positive has been steady and low for the last week, which, as the governor shared, is an important thing to notice and is good news. Today, the number is around that 1%. Over the past week, we have had days with very high testing numbers. One reason is because we've been doing a lot of baseline testing for college students. Rhode Island is the 8th highest state nationally in terms of percentage of states' populations that are college students. And for example, in the last week, we had 4 days when we did more than 5,000 tests, and 1 day when we did more than 8,000 tests. So as planned, the number of tests continue to increase, and this is a good thing. This is how we do case finding. This is how we get people who are positive identified and isolated so that they can recover safely at home without spreading COVID-19 or illness to others. And this is also how we get to their contacts and get them to be quarantined where they can continue to monitor. On those days, it's important for us to look at the percent positive and continue to see the low number that's there as we are increasing the amount of tests being done. So the number of new cases we are finding relative to how much testing we are doing is the critical point to assess. And again, this has been steady, which is a good sign. To continue with our data, we have 80 people currently hospitalized, and 11 people are currently in an intensive care unit in a hospital. In terms of fatalities, we have no new fatalities to report today, as the governor said. However, over the weekend, we had 5 additional unfortunate COVID-19 associated fatalities reported out. These cases were not associated with each other. We sometimes just see these small peaks and valleys in our data. Either way, each individual is a part of a family and people who care about them, and our prayers are with the families of each of these people. As usual, I want to spend a few minutes today giving you a feel for what we are seeing in terms of our case investigations. And in doing so, I also want to take a minute to give a shout out to the team, the COVID unit, EpiOps, who is working tirelessly, collecting the information on case investigations so that we can be among the states who learn and respond to it and apply the structure and planning that we need to. Many of you may have seen that the CDC director last week, Dr. Redfield, spoke about a study looking at secondary transmission in child care centers in Rhode Island in June and July. It's this same team collaborating with our testing team and our child care centers that really has been at the forefront of what's being done. And it again reiterates, when you have a structure in place and when you have planning done that's implemented in that systematic way, we can be effective as a state together. So let's hear a little bit about the data that we've been seeing from the cases and see the trends, the insights that we are taking from that. If we look at the week of August 12th to August 18th, we had 598 new cases. Of these 598 people, 41 reported recent travel and 45 had recently attended a social gathering. Examples of social gatherings continue to include a variety of parties, a confirmation party, birthday parties, a party at a beach, outing. Another trend that we are unfortunately continuing to see pertains to disparities. During this period, 274 of the 598 new cases who tested positive were identified as Hispanic or Latina. That means of the people who reported race and ethnicity information, 55% of our cases were among people who identified as Hispanic. We are continuing to prioritize partnering with communities to put short-term prevention measures in place As I've said, through our health equity zones, as one example, we have distributed more than 1 million masks in our high-density communities, and knowing that that's just a piece of it. There's so much more that we need to do. And the governor and I recently had a call with Latino community leaders who are part of the overall Equity Council that Secretary Woolman-Zeta Jones continues to lead well. And we talked with them about what else we can do in the short term to get people and communities the resources and the supports they need to be able to prevent transmission of COVID-19. In addition to those short-term approaches, we are also working on the larger, longer-term structural issues, such as housing and employment, that we know contribute to the differences in outcomes that we are seeing. We're going to keep you informed about what we're seeing in this area. In terms of schools, I want to join with the Commissioner and the Governor in also thanking our dear colleague, General Callahan, for his tremendous leadership and his whole team at the Rhode Island National Guard for their phenomenal, invaluable contributions. They have been working tirelessly. I also want to reiterate what I shared last week. Through this Education Operations Center structure, the Rhode Island Department of Health, in partnership with all those engaged, will do our part to continue to be all over any and every case of COVID-19 that is associated with a school, just in the same way we have been doing with childcare. We are also doing an enormous amount of preparation in advance, knowing the planning and structure that is key. And we are asking districts and schools to engage with us in that preparation work. That entails things like making sure that systems are in place to support allowing for testing rapidly in a school community so it can happen quickly and minimize disruption to learning. And as the governor mentioned, setting up a reporting portal so schools have a uniform and structured way to get information to us right away is also going to be key. While we continue to get these systems and structures in place, we are going to continue working with teachers, parents, and other stakeholders to address as many questions and issues as we can. We're grateful for the expert that the governor mentioned who's going to be joining with our team to help inform and respond to questions. And as part of our walkthroughs, we are going to take the approach, not as much as what DBR does and RIDO does with actual inspections, but as the governor said, work collaboratively with the teams, with experts inside and outside of the Rhode Island Department of Health to talk through the different scenarios that arise in classrooms and help ensure the compliance with the guidance is in place. As we have throughout this process, we're going to continue to do everything we can to answer the questions of everyone involved so you can continue to have the confidence of the work that's being done so that you have that choice with returning safely. The same way Dr. Redfield of the CDC lifted Rhode Island as that place that shows confidently how we do it with childcare. We're going to apply that same approach to schools. So with that, we'll get started with questions.
Governor, I've listened to you all summer, hearing you today. You've never hidden the fact how much you didn't like the outcomes with distance learning, how much you want students back in school. I know you're saying you're going to announce it next week, but it sounds like your mind is basically made up to allow in-person learning. Is that fair? And if not, what left in this final week could suddenly swing you to sending all the kids back to virtual learning?
Great question. So, we have the 5 metrics, and one of them is testing to make sure that we can have the level of testing that I know we need. I am highly confident that we're going to be able to make that announcement this Wednesday, as I said. But, we haven't made it yet. We have 2 days worth of work to do to make sure that we're going to be able to get it done. So if for some reason we can't get that done, which I don't anticipate, then I'd have to pause. And then cases. Thank God we're in a good place right now. Like 39 is great. But next Sunday night, we'll look back at this week's cases. And if we start to see a spike or something happens, then we'll have to pull back. So you're right. I mean, right now, as we stand here, it seems highly unlikely that next Monday I would say no. But I'm going to stick to what we said from the beginning: operational readiness, testing, contact tracing, data, case prevalence. And Sunday, we're going to see if we check all those boxes, which I think we will, based on where we are today.
And one follow-up question for the commissioner, because I assume you'd have more read on this than the governor. Are you getting data from the districts about the share of parents opting out? I'm hearing anecdotally parents mentioning to me, no, we're not going to send my kids back. Can you give us any read on how significant a percentage that is across the state? And are you seeing some districts where a high percentage of parents are already opting through pods or whatnot versus other places where a lot of them are ready to go back in person?
Yeah, so it varies district to district. So we are getting the numbers from districts. We have some districts where it's almost 50-50, and other places where it's a small number of parents that want to do distance learning and they want their kids in. As of Thursday, Providence only had 5,000 parents out of the 24,000. And I'm sure that number will grow a little more. But I think that there's parents that want both, right? Parents that want both. And the places that they are most worried about, they're asking to move to another district where they've already heard anecdotally that the district plans on just having one version of instruction. They've emailed me and asked, can I move to another district? So is that allowed? We're looking into that. We're looking into, in a pandemic, if my child really needs in-person instruction and another district is providing it, we're going to look into that. Absolutely. We want parents to understand that we know that there isn't one size fits all.
Governor, on the way in here, we were greeted by protesters really from both sides of this conversation. Now we can hear car horns. It seems like getting word that that's also a continuation of this protest. What is your office hearing from teachers and administrators about, just from the inside baseball perspective, should distance learning be prioritized or should in-person learning be prioritized? What sort of feeling do you get from, again, that inside baseball perspective?
Yeah. So I think it's about what you see outside. So for those of you at home who aren't here, there's protesters outside. Some are parents holding signs that say, real kids deserve real school. Like, parents are pushing us to get kids back in school. And then also folks blowing their horns and such, saying it's not safe to be in school. So that's what we hear. That's what we hear. We hear from everybody. Here's my assessment, for what it's worth. I think teachers miss their kids, they're professionals, and they want to be back in the classroom doing their job. They realize distance learning is going to leave a lot of kids behind. But they are demanding, rightfully, that we make it safe for them to do so, which is why I announced today we're going to do an inspection of every school building before you go back. We're going to have best-in-class testing that the state will run. We're going to promise no one ever falls behind on masks and cleaning supplies, because if your district does, we get you covered. So I think that it's all over the map for parents, truthfully. A lot of parents who have kids who are developmentally disabled, kids have underlying health conditions, a lot of them are just not going back in. We respect that. I think, from my perspective, the average parent has seen their kids suffer and struggle, and they're anxious to get their kids back to school.
Quick follow-up as well, just back to last week. Has the DOH signed off on any of the plans put forth by districts? Anything approved yet? I know you gave praise to SK and Newport. Are they rubber stamped as is?
Well, nothing has been rubber stamped. I should say that for folks at home. The reason this has taken us so long is because the Department of Health and Department of Education have gone through every aspect of every plan, and there's been a back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So there's no rubber stamp. Even the ones the Commissioner highlights, we have called and said, have you thought about doing it this way? Could you adjust it that way? By next Monday, they will have all been gone through and approved on.
Governor, with regard to the FEMA unemployment benefits, when did the state decide to apply Will the state participate at any level? And what were the underlying metrics at arriving at the $300 payment for 3 weeks?
So last week, as soon as there was an announcement, we got on it. And in fact, even when you asked me about it a week ago, we were already in back and forth with them. I think they approved it on Friday. Yes, Friday. So we got final approval on Friday. The state's role is we have to administer it. So we have to set up a new system to administer it. It's a little technical. The way it works, and I might need a little help here, this is for everyone who's been receiving at least $100 from the state. So the state's role, in addition to setting up a new system to administer it, is we are going to plus up everyone to get to that $100 level. So the state will have to kick in that amount of money. So if you were only receiving $50 from the state's going to give you the 50, so you become eligible, so that you can then get your $900. And the amount was determined by the feds. That's what we were given.
Governor, one other follow-up question, just briefly. It appears that the expenditure page on the Rhode Island Transparency Portal hasn't been updated really since the end of July. Now, one media wag pointed out that, well, we haven't spent any money since the end of July. I'll throw that out there. But will this be corrected soon?
It's updated. It'll be updated at the end of August.
Okay, thank you.
There you go.
Related to the extra FEMA money, Governor, for someone who's unemployed, do they have to do anything extra right now? Do they have to reach out to DLT? How is that? There's always some confusion in a situation like this.
The honest answer is we need, next Monday, I will go into that in great detail. We need a few days. We have to set up a whole new system to do this. So I wanted to announce it today because we got the approval Friday, and I wanted folks to know some relief is on the way. And it'll be $900, and it should be in your bank account in a few weeks. The Department of Labor and Training has to, this week, figure out those details. So if folks can hang on till the end of the week, I'd appreciate it.
Governor, the education...
But the answer is no. Like, it'll appear in their bank account, because we know who they are, and we'll just put the money in the bank account. I just don't know the exact details of when and what the process will look like.
The Education Ops Center, is that a proactive approach, or is that, do they react when suddenly there's an outbreak?
Both. It's both. That's an excellent question. It's excellent. It's both. So we are standing it up today. We have the team there, and they are proactively reaching out to schools, talking to principals, talking to superintendents. How's it going? What do you need? Especially around transportation. They're really trying to help them out with that. So right now it's very proactive. Once schools open and we start to see positive cases, this and that, it'll also be reactive.
The Bradley officials that you mentioned, those new symptoms that some children are exhibiting, is that something that they feel in-person learning could curb, or is it all things pandemic involved, maybe a parent's out of work, or?
Also an excellent question. You'd have to ask them, they're the experts, and I think the answer is it's both. However, they were clear to point out that it coincides with distance learning. Many children have been left alone. Many children have been, isolated in a room by themselves with an iPad while their parents work. And we hear a lot of it from kids who are definitely more sad, depressed, anxious because they can't get to school. So I think it is both, but yeah, absolutely. They were pretty clear that the isolation that comes with being at home due to distance learning contributed to it.
Governor, who is going to be running the new EOC?
The National Guard is primarily leading it, but in close collaboration with RIDE. So Angelica has done a fantastic job. She has a whole team within RIDE. Her chief of staff is on it, working hand in glove with General Callahan.
And have we updated, based on the most recent numbers, which communities would not be able to open right now if it today? Do we?
Do you know? I know it's Providence and Pawtucket and Central Falls.
Yeah, we'll be updating through the course of this week because we'll use data from last week. So later on, by Wednesday, we should have that updated information.
I think as of right now, it's those three.
Yes.
Yeah, it's today, but that goes to Ted's question. You know, if there is a unforeseen spike somewhere between now and next Monday, which I don't anticipate, then we would say so-and-so goes on the list. I do want to make one thing clear. For the private schools, the non-public schools, they have to follow 4 out of the 5 of the reopening metrics, but not the municipal readiness metric. So if it's a, say, private school in Providence, even though Providence, the city, won't pass the municipal check, if you're a parochial school or a private school in Providence, you don't have to do that because most of their kids don't come from Providence.
Governor,
Sorry, he wasn't finished. I interrupted.
And the numbers that Dr. Alexander Scott had about the number of cases in that last week in August that had to do with social gatherings, and then also the number of cases that identified as Hispanic, points to maybe we've had recently a bit of a focus on beaches, parties, recreation. Maybe this looks like the focus should be a little bit more back towards essential workers that we had a little bit earlier. I don't know if you could address that at all. Is that where maybe our focus has drifted a bit?
So what we are seeing with the data definitely points to more of that recreational activity contributing. What ends up happening is in our more dense communities where populations are closer together. If you are not wearing masks, engaging in the distancing effectively, the risk of transmission becomes higher and can be evidenced in some of our populations, as I shared, having cases more than with others. When we are seeing cases in work settings, most of the time it's connected to what happened in the community from a transmission standpoint. So we never want to let up in being able to focus on our work settings, helping to make sure that people have the support to not go to work sick, including and especially our essential workers who are on the front lines, making sure that all of us have the services we need, whether food in restaurants or family members in nursing homes and other places. We want to ensure that they have the support needed to stay home if they are sick or have any symptoms, and that they have the support needed to wear masks so that they are not at risk of transmitting and have the information that they need. We also know that those cases can be higher in the work setting if it is more in the community. And the highest risk of transmission in the community across the country, where all of my counterparts are relaying the same information, it's the social gatherings where people's guards are down and they're not wearing the masks effectively or at all. And they're relatively young or healthy feeling, so they think it's fine, and that's how transmission spreads. So we want to make sure, as we apply additional attention to those gatherings, wherever they're occurring, in all communities that they are occurring, that people understand how critical it is to continue to wear your mask, family gathering, social, otherwise.
I have a question for the governor. It's with the EDOC and the services that the state's providing, such as walkthroughs of school classrooms and so on, what happens if schools or classrooms basically flunk that walkthrough test? And I mean, at this point, I assume we have no real idea how many will pass, how many will fail, or what. But ultimately, that's going to come down to money, and a lot of other issues that are mentioned on that slide are money, including transportation, air quality, and a lot of things. So you said that you can provide PPE and that kind of support to school districts, but the expensive stuff, I don't know if you've really addressed that at all. What if schools need HVAC systems? What if schools need
Yeah.
HEPA filters? What if schools need buses?
So the answer to your fundamental question is if they flunk, then they can't open for full in-person learning. And however, I don't necessarily agree with you that it's just money. A fan, an open window, a tent in the parking lot, things, air filtration systems that we can procure, that we can buy. There's lots of different ways to skin a cat that it's not all money. Also, we've sent $50 million. In fact, just today, we put the application out for districts to apply, submit their reimbursements for this extra stuff that they're buying and to tap into their portion of the extra $50 million in order to do the retrofitting.
How many applications have come in, if any?
We just started today, so I suspect none as of whatever time it is now.
But to Michael's point, the cities and towns are very frustrated with the administration at this point. They say they haven't gotten their usual amount of money that they would have gotten on the pilot aid to begin with. I know the League of Cities and Towns is estimating it's going to cost more than $50 million. Senator Reid did make sure that 1.25 was in your hands back in April. And they're like, well, if it's here, why aren't we getting more? Why aren't we able to do this more quickly? I have to think the air filtration system is expensive, for example.
Not all of them. You'd be surprised, and that's why we've hired this. I've learned a lot from talking to these people. There are some really excellent low-cost, high-quality measures, and that's why we've hired a special air quality expert, which I am not. I hear their frustration. I'm frustrated with Congress and the Trump administration. Like, we don't have a budget passed. That is highly frustrating. I hear that the mayors are frustrated. I'm operating the government 1 month at a time according to last year's budget, and that's why they haven't received the increases. So their frustration is valid and heard. We're doing what we know how to do. I would say relatively in Rhode Island, our cities and towns are in much better position